Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we conclude with Part 12, The Initiatory Path from the Philosophy of Fire by our Swinburne Clymer, the Initiatory Path. The first step in the occult path is to thoroughly search the self, thereby to find the reason why such knowledge is desired. In many instances, the desire is unquestionably based on a selfish motive. When this is true, the path becomes a dangerous one to both body and reason, and it were much better for such an one to forego the quest, so avoiding the penalty that must be paid sooner or later when man attempts to use the divine forces for ulterior purposes. The neophyte, once having entered the path, there is actually no turning back. Experience teaches us that many who enter the way possibly one-half attempt to turn back, always ending in failure. The law set into motion when the entrance is made, and the vow taken cannot be recalled. It proceeds ever forward, and though the student seems to give up the search for a time, the internal urge, continually accentuated by the working of the law, will sooner or later force such to re-enter the path, and then it becomes doubly difficult for those who had entered for selfish purposes. The occult law may be thus set forth. The neophyte once admitted there can be no possibility of successfully retreating. One must succeed or lose freedom, and in some cases where the vow is broken, life itself. Because the powers of evil, which are aroused always when man undertakes to follow the spiritual life rather than the material, must be conquered, or they will conquer the seeker. The sincere seeker, he who in his heart desires the better and diviner life, cannot be intimidated. His desire is for wisdom and knowledge, that knowledge which comes through experience, aye, even through sorrow and suffering. Such know no fear, or if it is momentarily aroused within them, quickly master it and proceed with the work. Within man are all the passions of the animal world. Every animal known to man is represented in his being as so clearly depicted in Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. And though these passions may be dormant in man and lead him to the delusion he is not bound to them, no sooner does he enter the path than they become aroused and urge him to their satisfaction. Therefore, it is entirely possible one may have lived an exemplary life so far as the sex nature is concerned and been entirely free from temptation. No sooner does he enter the path when this nature within himself is aroused, and temptation after temptation from without comes his way. This is not because any great change has as yet taken place within himself, but because he has set forth to master the dragon. All dragons, and these feel their days will be numbered, unless they become the master. He has set a law into motion with which he must keep pace or become the slave. For this reason it has often been stated that fate is a peculiar feminine character. She will tempt man, betray man, and ruin him if she can. But once she learns she can do neither of these things, she becomes his willing slave. It is likewise with the passions. Man seemingly is a unit, a single being. As a fact, he is fearfully composite. Within him dwell all things in existence. He is actually the microcosm of the macrocosm, the small duplicate of the large world. While he lives the material life, these forces may be dormant. His power is merely nominal. But when he arouses himself, then he arouses all these forces likewise. And as he masters one after the other of these energies, forces or beings, he is possessed of a new power until at last, when he has mastered all the denizens within himself, he possesses all potency. Thus it is written, man shall become master of the beasts of the field, etc. Once the mastery of creatures within himself is well underway, another equally important step is undertaken. That of the search within the self for what may be found there. Within man are all powers, all forces, all wisdom, all that is. The ancients, knowing this to be true, wrote above their temples of initiation, man, know thyself, fully aware of the fact that once man accomplished this search successfully, he would have a knowledge of all. This search opens up unknown worlds and darkening shadows, not least of these being the gradual comprehension that he who has so far awakened as to comprehend that he must be different from others who have not yet awakened, and then is born within the feeling of a great and overpowering loneliness which seems to fill the entire being with sorrow and misery. The comprehension that the seeker must ultimately pass through this chamber of darkness as he had to pass through the chamber of animal creation and passion should not by any means prevent one from entering the path. For let it be known that before immortality can be reached by a living human being possessing a soul, this path must be traveled. Therefore it is the logical conclusion that sooner or later all souls must pass through the shadows. Apparently there is nothing more terrible than isolation and solitude to those who know of no other life than that of external sensation, and who cannot, as yet, create their own thought world, especially if there is no change in their surroundings to attract their attention and to stimulate them to think. Thinking is an art, and few can think what they wish or hold on to a thought. Once they can do this, they create their own world and can be happy in isolation. Men only think what they must. They feed on the ideas that enter their minds without their volition or at the behests of the physical appetites. Welcome and unwelcome thoughts enter. They neither come at their bidding nor go away when they are not wanted. They are like disorderly guests who do not obey the rules which the landlord prescribes. This is diffusion. It is the one reason why man is weak, sickly, and a failure. The path leads to concentration, to mastery of thought, and the power to create a constructive thought and hold to it until personification takes place. Naturally, in the beginning, there is confusion which seems to be destructive. The mind, awakening from its centuries of sleep and confusion, attempts, like a mother with a large family of untrained children, to bring order out of chaos and finds the din so much the greater. But gradually, very gradually, a separation begins to take place. Each one is placed in its own proper niche or sphere. And when all are well arranged, the mind, which has been enabled to establish system, will begin to construct new thoughts, new ideas, and new mental pictures, and life commences to take on an entirely new aspect. This is the awakening. The baptism of St. John by water or mind. Now that the mind has become awakened, aroused to a new state of existence, the power to picture a new world with new creatures, all of whom apparently work in harmony one with the other, man begins to look within his own soul. A new sphere opens before him. His image-forming faculty grows stronger, and pictures begin to present themselves before the inner eye and become objective and real as the objects of the external world. He begins to realize he can bring them into manifestation once he has fully developed all his powers and faculties. Visions of things formerly seen, but of which memory had been lost, appear again, vivid and real with all their living details. Desires entering the heart immediately take objective form in the mind, representing in seemingly living forms the objects of which he thinks. And thus may be seen many beautiful things in the vision, and desirable things learned, for this is the path to knowledge. Nor must we forget those sights which are undesirable, aye, horrible, for only he who has thoroughly cleansed the whole temple can be entirely free from disturbing vision. Therefore let your first duty be the cleansing of your temple in like manner as did Jesus clean the temple of robbers, thieves, and money changers. Even Jesus had his work of cleansing the temple from filth, degrading conditions, and undesirable denizens. What is the plastic power of the imagination, and what do men mean by calling subjective images merely works of the imagination? Can we imagine anything that does not exist? Are the creations of our thoughts less real to us than the things which the imagination of others created for us, since all things must exist first in the imagination? Is not the universe itself a product of the imagination of God? And are we not gods in our inner world, able to create forms from that which apparently does not yet exist? Did not the great teacher say through St. John, "But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God"? Gradually, as man finds himself, he sees within his inner world another world, with space as infinite as that of the outer world, with mountains and plains, with oceans and rivers, with creatures who now look up to him as their God. He has mastered them. These draw life from his will, and nourishment form his thoughts in the same sense as man now receives power and ideas from the God of the universe, appearing to him in his dreams while asleep and in visions while awake. The next step in the path is to be able to close the senses and the desires of the material world and being, thereby giving the spiritual desires an opportunity to be heard. This is not the work of a day or a week, but a result of training and growth. No vision is possible, nor will the spiritual sight be open to the initiate, unless he first has learned, through long training and concentration, to silence the senses and passions of the mortal being. Having opened the vision and spiritual sight, the initiate is well on the path to power and has the means to gain knowledge. Knowledge cannot be gained by any outside teaching. We may take the teacher's word for all he may tell us, but we cannot know or have knowledge unless the inner perceptions, the very soul, feels and senses that it is so. From the inner being, the soul, and through personal experience alone can come knowledge and understanding. To feel is to know, to suffer is to know, to create is to know, to see may be a delusion. The materialist who has not awakened the soul within has neither right nor power to know inner truths. It is only he who, through training and right living the life that is taught, has been enabled to awaken the still small voice, the inner being who can understand spiritual truths. The student must firmly close all the doors, external senses, and exclude all the profane, the sophists' and the scoffers' prejudices. Open up the spiritual perceptions. Beware of passions and evil desires. Avoid erroneous opinions and intellectual prejudices. Keep the mind continually directed toward the divine source of all existence. Strive after a continual realization of the presence of the Supreme, and, in the desire to walk upon the path of light to immortality, do not forget even for a moment that you are living in the consciousness of Him whose power has created the world. He is all things, and all things are in Him. He is self-existent, pure knowledge, pure wisdom, and although He is seen by no man except in the light or fire within your own center, there is nothing within the universe that can hide itself from His sight. The next step is to come into an understanding of the laws of nature and a comprehension that nothing within her is dead, but that all forms are manifestations of the one universal power of life. Learn to know the cause of the physical phenomena occurring in the world of phenomena, the nature of light and sound, of heat and electricity, and of all other things. The student must master the mystery of the spiritual nature of man and the laws of reincarnation, how the human nomad again and again descends to build up a mortal physical form and to evolve a new personality at each of its visits to Earth, that the human form, which we know as men, women, and children, are not the real man, but merely ever-changing aggregations of matter, endowed with an ever-changing consciousness, unsubstantial although living illusions, doomed to perish when the soul retires to its home, to rest from its labors, while the substantial, indivisible, and incorruptible spirit is the real man, continually returning to the earth plane until the mind is awakened, the soul illuminated, and the individuality created and perfected. The student is taught the signification of the sacred syllable AUM and of certain symbolical signs, including the double interlaced triangle, the snake, and the Tau, and his office is to guard the portals of man so that nothing impure may enter, for not one is ever admitted into the sanctuary of the inner temple unless he first proves himself a faithful guardian of that door by which evil thoughts and desires continuously attempt to enter the mind. And if the guardian of the door is not faithful to his trust, allowing these undesirable visitors to enter, then no talisman will prove of avail. These enemies of the soul of man can easily be kept from the sacred portals if the aspirations are for something higher than the gratification of sensual appetites and the beauty of. Any corporeal form, however pleasing it may be to the eyes, cannot enslave him who has learned to know the beauty of the spirit and who quickly retires to the throne of the soul when temptation comes. He who has not been tempted cannot know the power of temptation, nor yet can one learn the mysteries of the spirit who has not descended into the lowest caves where the supreme temptress dwells. Let no student take pride in his strength until he has been thoroughly tested, and let him not condemn one who may have fallen, for neither may he know the strength possessed by the tempter, nor yet the weakness of the one tempted. Let him search himself for his own weakness, and beware there is no secret entrance left open within himself, by which a favorite passion may enter, and should the temptress gain entrance during his slumber, he must call to his aid the superior power of his awakened will and repel her. Then will the door of the soul open, reason will enter and guide him by the light of divine wisdom, lest he forget it must be impressed upon its mind that the temptress does not come announcing her arrival with a blare of trumpets, but in the silence of the night when all seems well. No man can actually know his own weakness, not yet find his strength who does not descend to the innermost depths of his soul, where he may find it infested with poisonous serpents and venomous reptiles, the symbols of the brood of passions and spirits of evil desires. But if he calls to his aid the divine wisdom, these evil creatures will gradually leave him and give place to pure and holy desires and aspirations for the highest, and peace be established. The student, during his initiation, must come into a clear comprehension of the great law of karma, that is to say, the absolute law of cause and effect, not merely upon the physical plane, where the law of mechanics exists, but upon all planes, and in the higher realm, where divine justice rules supreme, where good finds its own reward and evil its own just punishment. Whatever man does or thinks will produce a corresponding reaction both upon himself and all things with which he is allied or connected. He who benefits others is actually benefiting himself, while he who injures others, if ever so slightly, is decreeing his own punishment. The acts of men are the external symbols of their interior lives, and every thought and act has a tendency to repeat itself. Thoughts become beings who struggle for life according to the strength given them by the thinker, and who seek to become embodied in acts. And when once embodied, they cling to their life in the same way man clings to his. The principal work of the student, besides self-purification, is the cultivation of the power of intuition, by which man may know the truth and attain wisdom, independent of external information and without the necessity of adopting the opinions of others by means of coming into direct communication with the hierarchies of learning. Finally, the neophyte must come to a clear comprehension that there is no relative good without relative evil. There is no man so pure as not to have some animal elements within his constitution. Were there such a man, he would not be able to develop higher. For the reason that it is from the animal element the soul draws its nourishment and strength to rise higher and become more spiritual, just as does the purest lily draw its life from the slimy bed of the lake. Not to destroy, but to make use of the elements of evil for the purpose of accomplishing good is the object of alchemy or the higher education. When the higher life begins to awaken within the soul and the light of the spirit penetrates into the regions of the elements, the animal egos begin to revolt and to rise to the surface. They may even appear in objective form, and thus the terror of the threshold may show his face. He may be nothing more than a product of man's own imagination, tinged or colored by the evil within which has not yet been transmuted. Nevertheless, to the eyes that see him, he seems as real as any other living thing among the so-called realities of this world. And if the candidate for initiation is subject to fear, the dweller may appear again and again and take possession of the mind. There is a region in the soul of man in which such dwellers reside. In very degraded persons, this region swarms with living, semi-developed or full-grown animal principles and subjective monstrosities of all kinds, and under certain conditions, especially if the physical organism is weakened by disease, they may, so to say, step out of their center and assume an objective form, clothing themselves in the grosser elements of matter and becoming visible even to the external senses. The materialization of modern spiritualism furnishes an example of this. Obsession is another, and is often curable only when a mastermind or one with experience controls for a time the mind of the obsessed and frees the victim of the control by means of the power of will. Frequently, students who have taken the vow and have proven unfaithful to it in some manner, either by betraying the secrets of that which is written for them alone, become victims of the terror, and can be freed only by redeeming their vow and by the help of the master who had been appointed as the instructor. When ye stand, take heed lest ye fall. Jesus. Our social life. Listen, all social problems lie in the conquest over the natural and personal man. It is the continual protest against the natural law. Rising into the world of love and self-consciousness, we rise into a world of freedom and equality. A great teacher has said, man is a composite being. In him is the angelic and the animal. The spiritual training of life means no more than the subjugation of the animal and the setting free of the angelic. There is a great and wonderful epitome founded upon having and holding in our possession the key that unlocks all doors and the knowledge of how to use and handle it. That key is love. He who loves lives, he who loves not is dead. He who loves himself alone lives in hell, because centering all the essence of existence upon his own body, he burns and shrivels under the intolerant intensity of its force. He who loves others lives in heaven because the desire to love and bring good reacts and compels harmony. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.